Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Joel Ingersoll from Take on College, president and founder here. Before we get started on our topic tonight, I am just waiting for a little confirmation that our audio is effectively working. So bear with me for 1 second. Okay, I think we are set. Terrific. Yes, we are set. Thanks for joining me tonight. This is a pretty serious topic, and I'm hopeful that you all are able to gain a lot of info out of it. And in fact, there's a lot of info to discuss. So before diving into secrets to college dropout prevention, just a little bit of background for those of you that haven't or didn't attend the last event that I held a few weeks ago. Just to add some credibility to all this. So I have a PhD in clinical psychology. I'm a certified master coach. And I spent 15 years working on college campuses, 13 of which I worked as a staff psychologist and coordinator of alcohol and other drugs. Coordinator of alcohol and other drug services, and also as an associate director for a counseling service as well. And I've taught many undergraduate and graduate courses. So I've had a great opportunity to interact with thousands and thousands of students over that period of time. And even in my coaching practice and my Take on College work, have the opportunity to also interact with lots of high school students as well. So I'm certainly able to speak to the range of concerns that students present with, whether in high school or transitioning into college or early career, and also to help parents and coach parents along the way as well, who are certainly concerned about their kids who they're really invested in. Couple of just housekeeping details. First and foremost, if you see me glance away, it's because I have another screen here and people are able to type in questions, and some questions have already come in. So if you see me glance away, I apologize for that. I'm not trying to be rude, but I do want to get to everything. And so my hope tonight is that I'm going to be able to help you spot trouble before your student sets foot on a college campus in 3 months, actually. And so we want to spot those trouble points now. I certainly want to help you intervene by making some parent communication adjustments, and also to identify a couple of top skills that are really, really critical for college students as they transition into college successfully. So I want to highlight a couple of those as well. And I mentioned people would be asking me questions, and I've gotten a few ahead of time. And something that I didn't make clear in the first event that I do want to make clear now, and certainly for upcoming events as well, and that is that I prioritize confidentiality so that when parents and guests do ask me questions, I do not provide any identifiable information just to protect their anonymity. And so if you are hesitant toward submitting a question for those reasons, rest assured that I wouldn't identify you personally unless you really wanted me to. So with that in mind, let's talk about this a bit. And I'd like to really start by asking you to join me in the parking lot of LaSalle University. It's the student parking lot of LaSalle University. And it's August 1988. It's really hot. And it's a pretty crowded parking lot. There's a lot of students with a lot of full cars that are beginning to unpack their belongings. And among these hundreds and hundreds of students, there is a guy there, an 18-year-old guy who is unpacking his hatchback that is just crammed full of every college essential imaginable. things like a TV without a remote, and VHS tapes, a boombox, cassette tapes, hair mousse, sea breeze, those kinds of items. And he's pretty excited, really excited. This is a new adventure. It's a new context. LaSalle was this guy's first choice, and so he was really looking forward to the experience. His mind was filled with wonder and excitement and even some anxiety, which is normal. And he was also feeling a little bit sad, knowing that he left behind a single-parent mom and also 2 younger siblings. But this was part of the journey for him. His social adjustment was nothing short of spectacular. Friends came very, very easy. Usually they were made over conversations with cheap beer, pickup basketball games, parties, and things like that. And despite an initial roommate conflict, which led to a roommate change, the social transition went pretty well. And academically, though, it was a different story. He was an average student in high school. Procrastination and time management and organization were certainly challenges to academic success. And plus, there was the added shift of higher expectations and demands with college courses. And he brought this high school academic approach to college. And initially, things went pretty well for the first 2 weeks anyway, which for most college first-year students, they sort of like ease you in for the first 2 weeks, and then boom, they like lower it on you, and things changed rather quickly. And for this guy, it certainly changed quickly. While he kept up with that exciting social life, the academic stuff became a bit more stressful. And it culminated with him taking midterms and getting grades back that were C's, D's, and F's. And it created a lot of anxiety for him. And despite receiving this feedback, he never once reached out to a professor. He never scheduled an appointment with an advisor. And he never even looked at that feedback and did anything with it. He just left it. And this pattern continued for weeks into the semester, even after midterms. And it got to the point where he became incredibly stressed and incredibly anxious and really embarrassed. And he ended up lying to his family. He ended up lying to his friends about his academic performance and was really, really struggling. After midterms and into the last 8 weeks of the semester, he carried a really, really heavy book bag around campus, even when he was planning not to attend classes. And not only that, he carried a lot of embarrassment. Again, he carried a lot of anxiety and a lot of self-doubt. And this persisted through the remainder of the semester into finals. And finals week was certainly fueled by really unhealthy behavior, sleepless nights, all-nighters, caffeine-fueled nights, poor food choices. And there was a steady diet of that for a couple of weeks leading through finals until he arrived home. And when he arrived home and grades came, he was met by a really interesting question by his mom, which was, is it mathematically possible to achieve such a low GPA? And that hurt him. And he decided that semester was so terrible to actually repeat the same approach for the following 2 semesters. Nothing changed. Despite promises to improve, despite promises to study more and to participate in study groups and to talk to professors. None of it ever happened. And the same results occurred. And he did really poorly academically. And he began to question things. He began to question future goals. He began to question his abilities. And consequently, he wound up in a pretty tough spot. And this led all the way up to his second semester sophomore year. And at the start of that semester, he sat at his desk and made two very simple adjustments. The first was that he cleared his dorm room desk space and created a workspace. And the second thing that he did was he took a philosophy book, an assigned philosophy book for that semester. And as he read each paragraph, he wrote a 1 to 8 word summary in the margin of the book for each paragraph. And he did that with every class, with every reading assignment in every class. And it worked. It really worked. It was his aha moment, which are really great moments. They're really exciting moments when people have the opportunity to do a personal assessment and make adjustments, and that adjustment leads to success. And he achieved his first A in that class. And more importantly than the grade, he really connected with things like confidence, with a belief in his ability to succeed, and certainly inspiration and motivation. And it was at that desk, it was at that moment when I discovered the value of self-awareness and how important that is. I was that student, and that's my story. And I never thought self-awareness in my car and bring it to LaSalle University in the summer of 1988, because no one ever told me, nor did anyone ever teach me the value of it and the reason to pack it in the first place. And I'm telling you this story because I want to introduce the topic that way. And it was certainly one of the inspirations for 20 plus years later for me to take on college and develop programs to not only help parents, but students as well. Because self-awareness is one of many, many skills that fall under the umbrella of emotional intelligence that students are never, ever graded on. They're not emphasized. I was never graded on anything like self-awareness or empathy or effective communication or any of the multitude of skills and factors that fall under the umbrella of emotional intelligence. We're about to introduce this topic, this scary topic of college dropout prevention, because in large part there are a lot of troubling trends. And this was the other reason for me putting together this particular talk. When we learn about trends that aren't really advertised by colleges and high schools, they become a bit alarming. And I did a talk a few weeks ago at a high school, and the looks on parents' faces when I started citing some of these trends was a bit concerning. So when we hear things like 30% of first-year college students don't return for their second year, or 50%, close to 50% of college students don't graduate, or those that do take on average 5 to 6 years to graduate. And we hear things like over 40% of students fulfill criteria for mild to moderate anxiety, or that 85% of them feel, completely overwhelmed by all the work that we have to do. That's pretty scary, and it has great implications not only on skills that are necessary to succeed in college transition, but also skills to succeed while in college, and also to succeed in transition from college into career. And I want to emphasize that too, because another couple of trends that we're noticing that are really disturbing to me, and the look of shock on parents' faces when I tell them this certainly validates that. We know that about 8% of college graduates bring a parent to their first job interview post-graduation, and that 3% of them actually ask a parent to sit in on the interview with them for that first job. So those are kind of scary things, and it really makes us wonder, and it makes me think about, well, what's missing here? And how can we best prepare our college students for successful transition and tapping into a skill set that is really, really critical for their personal development and personal success, really. So when I mentioned the topic of self-awareness, it's probably one of the top 3 or 4 that I always emphasize to bring to college, to pack, for college. A couple of others that I just want to highlight for you, though, include self-regulation. And this is certainly an important one, and we don't hear about it a lot. And it also falls under that umbrella of emotional intelligence. And it's a really key skill for students to develop. And self-regulation is that ability to recognize what emotional state we're experiencing. And most importantly, not let that emotional state get the best of us. So whether it's anger or anxiety or sadness, that's connected to adjustment or anything else, that we're aware of it, but we're not going to let it derail us from success and from moving forward. So that's a second one that I would certainly highlight. And a third one is certainly effective communication. And the reason why I'm highlighting that one is because, unfortunately, and this might be a real adjustment for you all parents out there, is that while in high school, parents have so much access to student information. You can hop on basically whatever computer program that your school is using and track your students' attendance, track your students' progress and academically and things like that. And that's a little harder to do when they're in college and they're away. And so their ability to effectively communicate, which is that third skill I want to highlight, is really, really critical. Because what happens is that when students transition into college, usually, if they are going to ask for help at all, they don't do it in the fall until November and in the spring until April. And by then it's too late. So that's part of a real concern and a real key skill for your students to be aware of. So self-awareness, self-regulation, effective communication, and there are a whole host of others. And it's one of the reasons why, I developed the college summer intensive so that we have an opportunity to teach students as well there the whole range of skills that are necessary for them to develop. I am sharing this information also with you now because, again, highlighting that we have 3 months before students are going to report to campus, that part of the key things for parents is to be able to spot trouble points. And my guess is, based on some of the questions that I've received, and not only for tonight, but for previous talks that I've done, is that you're already identifying trouble points. And I say that because your students by now have committed to a college. They've known about their acceptance to college for months. And if they applied early admission, they've known for up to 8 months, maybe. Now, I remember, being a student and getting those letters of acceptance. And when I got the one from LaSalle, I said, wow, thank goodness, this is over. And like many students, I certainly kind of backed off my responsibilities academically in high school. And I didn't really take the time to prep, for college transition then. So that term senioritis has been around for a long, long time, and it's still around, and it certainly speaks to the frequency of concerns that I receive from parents that, wow, is my kid really ready to do this? I'm noticing this. They want to hang out with their friends more. Their grades have really dropped senior year and they don't care as much. And all of those things are really telltale signs of the development of not so good habits. And it takes a while for good habits to develop. And again, people make promises like New Year's resolutions and generally fall back on those promises after 15 days. We're talking about major adjustments, and we're talking about a 3-month window because this will be such an incredible adjustment for them. I mean, if we think about skills like time management and organization, those two alone, our students up to this point, up to 12th grade, their time has been managed entirely by a system other than themselves. From parents to teachers to school systems to tutors to coaches to whatever it might be, systems have been in place for them and they've never really had to initiate and do that themselves. Well, mid-August, that all ends. The bells that go off in class that tell them to go to their science class, or whether it's lunchtime or not, that's all gone, and they are left to their own vices at that point. So if they haven't developed those skills, it can be pretty overwhelming in terms of how to effectively organize themselves, especially if they're bringing other types of academic and social approaches that they've developed in high school into college. So that can certainly make the adjustment really difficult. There's lots of other things that lead to college dropout. I mentioned a few of them: that academic approach, certainly the social approach that people take. If they invest themselves too much in partying, it can certainly take an effect. And in fact, a couple of people have asked me to speak more thoroughly on that topic, which I will do an additional event that addresses specifically the party scene. So that'll be upcoming as well. For parents, there are a couple of keys on what to do and how to intervene effectively. And we're going to break tradition here a little bit, and we're going to challenge a social norm that there is this expectation that kids are supposed to go to college right after high school. And that no matter what's going on, no matter what observations you're making, those little trouble spots that you're observing, that you're still going to send your kid off to college. And I totally understand that. And that's the trend. That's the norm that's been set. And they being students certainly have their own mindset and expectation of what college is going to be like. So oftentimes those two views clash. Parents and kids, go figure. It certainly happens on a variety of other topics as well. But what I want to encourage parents to do is to have the investment conversation with kids, with your students. And by that, I mean that you're all making an enormous financial investment in your child's education. And each year, that tuition bill is going to creep up and up and up. I mean, over the next 4 years, it's projected to increase about 3.5% each year over the next 4 years. And it's a lot of money, and it's a huge investment. But what I'm really interested in and what I challenge parents on is to engage your student in a conversation about what their investment is going to be. And it needs to go beyond like, I'm just going to study and get good grades, because by and large, we know at this point that if that's what students are focused on, to just go to college and get good grades and get a degree, it's not enough. It is absolutely not enough. There are far too many students that I work with now and coach now that are recent graduates that have really, really struggled because even though they've done well academically, they haven't developed as a whole person. And they haven't developed the skills that I mentioned earlier that are really, really critical to success. And so the investment conversation is really, really important. Have them discuss, their plan, really, their plan to not only invest themselves, with academics, but more so how they're going to take care of themselves, what stress management's going to look like, what are they going to do to troubleshoot certain situations, and how are they going to do that effectively on their own, which campus resources can be most valuable, to them, and to be as proactive as possible with that. And given that word proactive, which I really want to emphasize, there was a question that a parent had posed a couple of days ago, actually, that I just want to introduce to you that kind of highlights some of this stuff and highlights some of the concerns as well. So here goes. I have a daughter who is twice exceptional, has a high IQ, and mild attention deficit and auditory processing issues in large settings. When she gets C's in school and low B's after thinking she knows the topic or misses out on something in note-taking, her automatic response is that she is dumb. As she heads to college as a student athlete and in a pre-doctorate health field track, I'm super concerned about freshman year, as she has to advocate for her needs in a large setting in order to maintain her GPA for this particular health track. I believe her anxiety, inability to ask for help, and lack of emotional IQ/self-awareness are hindering her. But how do we help motivate or convince her that the best approach is the proactive one? This is a really, really great question, and I want to thank that parent for sending that out because it really kind of highlights everything that we're talking about here. First and foremost, some of the things that I picked out from it is that she has this automatic response, and I'm sure most of you caught that as well, that when she doesn't do well, the automatic thought is, I am dumb. So she labels herself very negatively. That is absolutely not productive, and I want to highlight why. Because most times when students do not do well in college, they are very reluctant to go and assert themselves to a professor, to schedule an appointment with them, to reach out to academic advising. Most of the time, students will take that paper and that grade and put it aside, and they won't pay any attention to it. Now, this is really critical, especially for first-year students, because you're going from high school, which is about 10 months, where they can have some time and certainly guidance, and certainly teachers and parents will be, all over them about, a poor grade or a pattern of it. But they're going from 10 months to 16 weeks. And those 16 weeks go pretty quickly, and they're not likely to be monitored as closely. And they are usually reluctant to follow up. And it really has great implications, and it really kind of digs students into a hole. Ideally, when students get a test or a paper back like that with a low grade or a subpar grade that they're not happy with, the best thing to do is immediately learn the material. That, and to schedule an appointment right away with a professor. And it conveys an important message to a professor, and that is that, hey, I really care about this class, and that I really care about doing well. And that is a very, very powerful thing to do. And it also engages students in developing a skill, again, that they're not graded on: effective communication, problem solving, and assertiveness. They're never going to receive grades on those things, but they're really key skills to develop. A couple of other things that I noticed in this is that this person's going to be a student athlete. So it's certainly going to tap into their ability to effectively manage their time and organize their time. Now, student athletes in most schools have a real benefit that there are specific academic advisors and tutors that will help them do that. But nonetheless, the student still has to go home and do the work. And I also wanted to point out something that I will do so in a subsequent talk. And that's the concern about, okay, this student is coming in with some history of attention deficit and auditory processing concerns. Self-advocacy is really, really key. Knowing now what offices on that campus are going to be most valuable and helpful, not only to your students' transition, but success, it's absolutely critical that you contact them now, like this summer. And if there's any supportive material that can benefit them in helping your student, make sure they have it before school starts. Because it's after school starts and when trouble starts that those offices become absolutely crazy busy. And we don't want a student to slip through the cracks who could really benefit from those services. Lastly, it really, this question about a parent's concern about her child's ability to ask for help, about advocating for herself, about being proactive, and how do we best motivate, our student? Well, in addition to the in addition to the investment conversation that we have with students, with our kids, there's another tip for parents, and it really challenges you in our role as a parent up to this point, where we wear many hats, and we discipline our kids when they're younger, and we teach them right from wrong, and we advocate for them, and we problem solve for them. And my suggestion to parents is almost to evolve into becoming a parent coach. And the reason for that is because normally, and I'm sure most of you have experienced this, with your kids, or maybe you even did it as a kid, when a parent starts advising an adolescent, and especially an adolescent who's a junior or senior in high school, or even in college, a young adult, on how to live their lives, or how to solve problems, or even worse, like, hey, here's what I did, that usually doesn't go well whatsoever. And it's usually met with, I'll use the word resistance, or backlash, and I'm sure you have certain words that you use as well, but it usually winds up in conflict, and it doesn't go very well. So one suggestion that I would have there is to just modify or adjust the language that we use with our student, and the conversation. So some of that dialogue might be, so when you've had these challenges in high school, you've handled them this way. Tell me a little bit about how you'd handle them, when you're at the University of Wisconsin or the University of Michigan. What does that look like? How do you anticipate having conversations with helpful people on campus about it? And really highlight, the highlight there is that they become their own problem solvers. And you may not get the response that you want right away. They might not say like, okay, mom, okay, dad, I'm going to go out and I'm going to call that advisor tomorrow and schedule that appointment. Because they've been used to thinking and interacting in a certain way for so long that we're talking about making an adjustment here. And sometimes those adjustments take time. So what we want to start to do is we want to start to plant seeds. And we want to plant seeds in the way where we are asking thoughtful questions, and not being so like, you need to do this, or you have to do this, or you should do this, because those things never work. So careful thought onto, how that dialogue is playing out for you with your student. And the one other thing I wanted to highlight here is that there's this cycle that's going on with your student here, where they get into a lot of negative self-language and self-labeling. I'm dumb, which is, really, it's a sad thing to hear, and I don't allow students to use that word. So that and like stupid, they're not allowed to self-label with those words. When students get caught up in those kinds of thought cycles, they miss the opportunity, as many of us do when we get caught up in those negative thought cycles, miss the opportunity to recognize strengths and personal strengths. So here's a 12th grader who is goal-driven, who has been a student athlete, and I'm guessing that if this is a student athlete who's going to compete collegiately, they've been a student athlete for a long time, which takes a lot of self-discipline and commitment and the ability to self-motivate and to stay disciplined, to respond to coaching. There's a whole host. And in addition, she's been very successful despite the fact that she's had some diagnosed challenges, things like ADD and some auditory processing challenges. She's still been successful there. So it's really, really important to highlight our kids' strengths. And we live in this culture where kids just get over pathologized and labeled, and consequently we kind of get lost in that, and we spend so much time trying to figure out how to fix them that we often miss opportunities on how to sort of get underneath them and really support them and help them identify those strengths, because they're actually going to be really, really critical to this student and to any student as they transition into high school and certainly into college and career. So those are really important factors as well. I want to also, I have another question here. In addition to the factors that you've mentioned so far, can you talk a little bit more about other emotional intelligence factors that are really important for college transition? Sure. And certainly these are factors that, thank you for the question. These are factors that I write very extensively about. And lots of people ask me, this question, wow, you do a lot of writing for parents, and but how can you help my kid? And certainly I do a lot of writing and coaching toward kids as well. And if you are on your Facebook page right now, you can see to the left of your screen, there's a box there that highlights, or you can click on to get a sense of the programming that I do with students that help them build these skills and develop these skills prior to getting into college. And even if they are in college and have had a setback year or whatever, they're still eligible to take these, courses and programs and things like that. But one of the other ones that I would certainly highlight there, especially transitioning into school, and it kind of taps into that self-regulation topic, is coping confidence. And that seems to be a really significant challenge for a lot of students, because what ends up happening for many students and many people really is that, as stress and psychological challenges increase in a person's life, their coping confidence tends to decrease. And when that happens, it really leaves them stuck. And as the gap between those two things get bigger, it really leaves them in a tough place. And whether we're talking about anxiety or depression or whatever it might be, students feel like they're trapped. And I think trapped is really the operative word there. And again, knowing what we know about their lack of initiative in approaching people for help on college campuses, it's something to really be aware of. So to have that dialogue with a student about the ability to cope and to be able to point out situations and circumstances that come up just very naturally, where you're able to have your eyes wide open about moments, teachable moments, to say like, hey, you know what? We need to talk about this. This is really about self-awareness, or this is really about coping confidence, because these are skills, again, that there's not a whole lot of time between now to develop them successfully when they get into school. So the earlier you have those conversations with them, the better. And the earlier you encourage them to be proactive, the better. And the frustrating part usually for parents is that that it doesn't necessarily happen immediately, and students don't necessarily take the initiative right away. But again, really, really key to plant those seeds, and certainly to be sure that they are in dialogue with you from now until the time they leave for school about, you know, their personal investment, their psychological investment in school. Those can be really helpful conversations as well. So a couple of things before I take some more questions and wrap up tonight. The programs that I was referring to earlier, you know, I really appreciate people tuning into these things and listening. And so I want to mention a couple of things about those. First and foremost, I'm available for personal consultation, though it's somewhat limited because people have contacted me a couple of months out and are scheduling, you know, for that. So there should be a link on your page, actually, if you up at the top of your page that says book now. So I'd encourage you to do that if you had another question that I don't get to, or wanted to schedule a consult to talk about, you know, your student and appropriate directions for them to go in. I'm happy to do that. Absolutely email me questions. You can also send me questions via instant message as well, and I will respond to you personally on all of that. And then finally, I wanted to let you all know that for tuning in tonight through my summer coaching intensive, that I'm offering everyone here who attends a $100 discount on that program this summer, where I really get involved with students over 6 sessions and really help them understand the really critical skills for them to develop and be aware of now prior to getting into school, and also how it will help them succeed not only, you know, while they're in school, but certainly when they graduate too. In addition, I cover things like the party scene and those concerns, how to use campus resources effectively, and so forth. So they're really built towards student success, and, you know, I'm hopeful that you take advantage of that. In doing so, with that discount, there is a particular code that you can only use through the Facebook app, and it's called NODROP, NODROP. And if you fill that in, then you'll certainly be eligible for that. So, and please, you know, forward any questions that you have outside of that. Upcoming things that I want to highlight as well is has been put on my calendar, you know, mainly through parent concerns and listening to them. And as I mentioned earlier, I had the pleasure of meeting with parent groups at a high school recently, and they verbalized a whole lot of concerns relative to mental health and on college campuses. So I'm going to do an upcoming seminar on that, as well as certainly that party scene and some other adjustment topics as well to be helpful to your students. So I want to check my board real quick because I have gotten a couple of other questions. And okay, so dear Joel, okay, dear Joel, one of my top concerns is that my student starts out strong and then ends up sabotaging themselves. And this is a parent of a high school student, and this is something that's really, really common. And so I'll take a minute to speak to this one. Thanks for your question. That assertion of, okay, I'm going to do this differently, I'm going to start out strong, I'm going to study more this semester, you might observe that over a period of time. However, most of the time, students fall back into old patterns. And the reason for that is, or one of the reasons for that is that they don't necessarily see an immediate benefit to the change that they're making. So if they go ahead and they increase their studying from, say, like twice a week to 20 minutes every day, and they don't see an immediate result, it's very easy, and they slip into this pattern of saying, well, it doesn't work. And that is an excuse and a reflection that happens with most things that we want to change and try something new, right? So people might try like a new workout routine, or try eating differently, or studying differently, or doing something at work differently. Or actually, you know, if people come in and see me as a coach or something, and if they say something like, you know, well, you know, you told me to do this thing, or we talked about doing this thing, and I went and did this thing and it didn't work right away. Well, no, it's not going to, because what we're trying to do is develop a habit. And again, habits take time to develop. And, you know, it's one of the reasons why now for like high school seniors, you know, I really encouraging them to finish strong, because right now most of them are developing really bad habits, and then what, we wait until September to sort of pick them back up again and start doing things the right way, and that usually doesn't work out very well. So the sooner we can start engaging in positive habits, the better. And those positive habits that I'm referring to fall into a couple of different categories. First are things that we actually do behaviorally, like go to the library more, or go and exercise more. So there's the behavior part, but then there's also the thinking part too. And if we go back to that note that the one parent wrote to me about her daughter, that thinking pattern of immediately saying I'm dumb after getting like a bad test grade, we really want to practice the opposite of that. And there are certain ways to do that. And initially that might feel a little bit funny and a bit awkward, but to begin to practice recognizing and affirming our personal strengths every single day can be an absolutely invaluable experience. And it is as important as any other positive habit to develop. So I would certainly encourage that student and all students to begin to practice, you know, those positive behaviors and positive habits, and to stick with them. And if they have trouble sticking with them, therein really lies the value of connecting with someone, with a strategic partner, be it a coach or a teacher, or even a parent or a friend, who's going to help hold them accountable to follow through with that, so that the habit and the new behavior sticks. So that's certainly something that I would encourage that student to do as well. Other questions? What other problem areas do you often notice prior to the start of college? That's a really good question too, and I would highlight here health and stress management behaviors. Your students will encounter very stressful moments in college. They could be socially stressed about that transition, or challenged by making friends. They could be stressed by academics and taking finals and things like that, and among other things, career decisions. I mean, you know, you name it. And if a student doesn't have a real effective way of dealing with stress just on a regular basis, that's going to be really challenging for them, especially again within like a shortened, you know, 16-week semester experience. So I would certainly highlight stress management, and health behaviors are really connected with that. So summertime hits, sleep habits become terrible. You know, students might be eating late at night, just really poorly, sleeping all day, etc. And if you're carrying that into the fall semester, and then we got to wake up early for a 9 a.m. class and be able to perform and think, critically and effectively all day long, well, that's sort of a setup for, disaster as well. So I would certainly highlight those two factors, and practice those things as well. So I know there's a lot of work to do, between now and August, and whether you have a high school senior, or whether your student has just returned from college, or whether you have a middle school student, or a 9th, 10th, or 11th grader, the earlier that we develop these skills and help our students develop these skills, the better. So I'd certainly encourage you to do that and have those conversations with your student. And again, if I can be of any help, please let me know. Feel free to send me an email. There are a variety of different ways to connect with me, through Facebook, through email, and or you could call. And I hope that you follow up and tune in for some future events as well. And please let me know if I can be of any help in the future. Okay, take care. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.